What size of pot should you be using for your Streptocarpus? I grow streps in relatively small pots, and I give them to friends or I sell them to people. And then they come along and tell me later, well, they transplanted them right away because they were in such tiny pots, and then they died. Why is that? What size of pot do these plants really like, and why? That's what I'm going to discuss in this video. I'd like you to meet one of my favorite Streptocarpus. This is a seedling that a friend of mine grew a number of years ago and gave to me, and I thought it was such a special plant that it needed to be named. So I named it after her. This is Donna's Pink. I've had it for about 3 years. It's bloomed constantly that whole time. It always has lots of flowers on it. I mean, I've had over 50 open flowers on this plant at one time. Right now, it's taking a bit of a rest and it only has 30 flowers on it. Lots of new buds coming, though. Now, if you want to know how to grow plants like this, stick with me. This is an important video for strep growers. What size pot should you be using? Well, when I want to know things like this, I like to go back to the plant and understand how it grows in nature. Now, we've taken these plants and we've hybridized them. We've got larger flowers, we've got doubles, we have different colors and so on. But the reality is that the genetics has not changed that much. This plant still likes to grow just like it did in nature. By understanding how it grows in nature, we better understand how it wants to grow in culture. So how does it grow in nature? Streptocarpus dunii grows in full sun on the side of cliffs. If we have a close look at the ground, what you see is lots of rocks and very little soil between them. So you can imagine the life of this plant. It dries out a lot. Then it rains, the soil gets wet. Then it dries out again. But the important thing here is the soil itself. There isn't much soil on these rocks. There's just small crevices and small amounts of soil. What that means is that the roots are constantly exposed to a lot of air. That's going to become critical in our discussion. The ancestors of most of the Streptocarpus we grow don't really grow in a place like this. They like a more shaded area. So they grow in a wooded area or somewhere where they get dappled shade. But if we have a look at the ground, it's similar. Lots of rocks, very little soil. These plants like to grow in cracks in the rocks. Very little soil, lots of air, and the occasional drying. There's not a lot of moisture in this soil because there's very little of it. It dries out quickly. Now let's go back to Donna's Pink. If we have a look at the base of this, it's grown in a fairly small pot. This is a 4-inch pot. Now this plant has grown large enough that the growths have almost reached the edge of the pot. It's really time to divide this and repot it. Or I could move it to a larger pot. What is the best option here? Well, all of my Streptocarpus grow in a pot this size or smaller. I don't grow anything in a large pot except one example, which I'm going to show you in a second. I let them grow in the 4-inch pot until they reach the edge, like this one. I'll cut it up into smaller pieces and start a new plant. And by the way, the divisions that come off of this plant are available for sale if you're in Canada. I also sell leaves in Canada and seeds international. You can get more information about those at streptocarpus.ca. So why do I stick to these small pots? Here's another one of my plants. It's a seedling of mine, and I think I'm going to name this one. Right now, its name is RP131, but I think it deserves a proper name. It's a really nice larger flower, and it's very flat, and it kind of leans a little bit, so it has a really nice display. If you grow these things under lights, they'll flower 12 months of the year. So this is my mother plant. Again, it's in a 4-inch pot. The growth here is reaching the edge of the pot, but if I turn it around, there's still lots of space on this side for growth, so it's not ready to divide yet. I did divide this plant a little while ago, and the division of this is now growing well on its own and starting to flower. Let's have a look at the roots on it. This plant here is almost filling a 3-inch pot. That's the smaller plant that I use for seedlings and division. When I take the pot off, have a close look at the root system. You'll see that all of the roots are growing on the outside of the root ball. They're growing down the side between the soil and the plastic pot. Eventually, the root system does get large enough to reach the bottom of the pot, and it will completely grow across the bottom of the pot. But if we have a close look at this, you'll see that there are almost no roots on the inside of the root ball. Why is that? That seems very strange. Well, we have to go back to how these plants grow. These plants like a little moisture and lots of air. The space between the soil and the plastic pot is perfect for them. On the one side, they get moisture from the soil, and on the other side, they're exposed to air. These roots are fairly dry all the time, although they have access to some moisture. That's perfect for them. If those roots start growing into the root ball in the center, they're just too wet in there. There isn't enough air for them, so they tend to grow on the outside. That tells me that we need to use small pots for these plants. As I mentioned earlier, I've given plants to people and they don't like the small pots, so they put them into bigger pots, feeling they're going to do something good for the plant, and then in no time at all, they're dead. And we tell new growers, don't put them in large pots. But I wondered, why can't you grow them in large pots? Remember, the plant doesn't actually know what size pot it's in. What's important to the plant roots is the amount of air and the amount of moisture. So if we put them in a large pot and we water correctly, they should grow. So I thought I'd do a little experiment. Here's another one of my seedlings. Kind of a pretty flower, but the flowers don't open quite right, so it's a reject. At some point it's going on the compost pile. That's a good seedling to do some experiments with. So I put it in a big pot. This is a 6-inch pot, and we'd never recommend one this large for Streptocarpus, but I wanted to see what would happen. And I did this in January. It's now the middle of July. So it's been in here for quite a while. And I've watered it along with my regular plants, which is about every 5 days. Now I haven't put a lot of water in here. I tried to keep it a little on the dry side, but it did get watered regularly. And as you can see, it's still alive. It's been flowering since January. So I haven't killed the plant. So the idea that large pots will kill your plant aren't correct. The important part is if you're going to use large pots, you have to water correctly for a large pot. You can't water as often. You have to let it dry out. Now, one thing I have noticed is that all of the older leaves have this bronzy color. The base is green, and then it goes to this sort of bronzy color. And all of the leaves have done that. Now, new leaves in the center are green. But if I keep watering it the same way, I'm going to end up with these leaves also going bronzy. It's not a really healthy plant, even though it's flowering quite well. The roots of this plant are not getting enough air. There's too much soil. It's too moist. The roots aren't growing well. They haven't had a chance to get to the outside of the pot yet to grow down the side. They're stuck in the middle trying to find places that are dry enough for them to grow. So it's not really happy in this pot. Now I'm going to continue the experiment and see what happens, because now I've taken this plant and put it on the side, and I'm going to water it much less often. I'm going to start growing it like a cactus pretty much. Let it dry out. Until the pot is completely dry, I'm not going to water. I think that will work. But why bother using a large pot? Even if I can make it work, why do that? A smaller pot works just as well and takes less soil, so it's actually less expensive. This is a really happy plant. This one is alive and flowering, but it's not really healthy. So what size of pot do I use? Well, as I mentioned, for my larger mother plants, they get this 4-inch pot. Smaller divisions will get a 3-inch pot. I don't go any smaller than that, because if I do, I have to water too often, and I have too many plants for that. If I have seedlings, they like smaller pots, but the way I handle seedlings is I put several seedlings in one pot. So the larger seedlings, I might put 3 in a pot, and if they're smaller seedlings, there might be 5 or 6 in a pot. That provides these seedlings with a drier soil, and they're a little happier that way. I don't want to put a small seedling in a 4-inch pot. That's just too big for it. It will struggle there. As I mentioned, this plant is ready to be divided, and if you'd like to learn how to divide these plants properly, have a look at this video right here. Happy gardening.